I just love your exhibit because it's very colorful, extremely colorful, of people who went through a very hard time when they came to this country. It's not dark or depressing, but it's like the light of their biggest hopes, most vivid dreams just comes through, just comes at us. Um, why did you decide to pay attention to your Italian American roots in this exhibit?
Well, partly because I had never really done work that focused on my own people, my own history, my own family. Um, it was time, I realized that my work on Cuba and being in Cuba and connecting with Cubans kind of brought me back to my own family because I felt like family down there. It felt like I was at my grandmother's house the whole time I was there, all the people I met, the homes I went into, how I was welcomed. So that really, after I finished that project, I felt like now it's time for me to just dig into my own roots and understand my own kind of the Italian American relationship to, or the Italian relationship to America, like what that journey encapsulated, what could it teach us about the US. It was sort of also in response to the uh, the racial class reckoning around George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, their killings. So all of these things were converging at the same time. And I had also gotten tired of painting using kind of local color for the flesh tones. And so um, I really wanted to capture how I felt in my grandmother's home and the kind of family that I come from and the feelings in my family, and really the magic that my grandmother was able to create despite suffering, despite poverty, despite no education, formal education.
11 children.
11 children.
That's how it was in my family too. Just lots of children to work in the field, and some, made to survive. Well, all the way to survive. Some did and some didn't. Um, and you say that you went through photographs. How did you know where to place the photographs? How to change the backgrounds? What were you thinking or feeling when you thought of the backgrounds and where they're standing, where they are in your paintings?
So my process is intuitive in many ways. Even the face, even each face, how I break each value down to a color, the relationship between the colors is something that I arrive at organically just by placing one color next to the other and seeing does that work for me. So the backgrounds were similar. There's uh there's there's an interview by the great English painter Francis Bacon who talked a lot about what it means to be a painter using photographs as references. And one of the things he talks about that really struck home with me, because my roots began in photography as a visual artist, is that the painter must do things that the camera cannot. And so when I started using these photographs, historical photographs, archival photographs, and family photographs, my photographic eye was able to pick the compositions and the feeling, the aliveness of the image so that I knew I wanted to interpret it. But once I started to interpret it, I needed to move it as far away from the actual photograph as I could in order to create a new work that I feel like had life of its own
Yeah,
beyond what a photograph can do.
yeah. There's it's very interesting. I'm going to put a link that there's also mosaics. Este, and I'm trying to imagine what it feels like to create this work of art and then show it to the public. You have your opening reception, it's there on for all to see, and it's like opening your soul, right?
Yes.
And what does that feel like?
Well, it's like it took me a long time to actually show this work. I started the first work in that series I did in late 2020. Was that late 2020 or 2021? It was late 2021. So, in the beginning, even well into the series, I wasn't even ready to share it online. I wasn't ready for anyone to see it. I really needed to make the work and sit with it, and it was scary on some level, but it was also really enlivening and inspiring. Even when I talk about the work, I get choked up. I can't hold the emotion in because in talking about it, it's talking about the dreams of my mother and my grandmother, who were both artists, who my mother didn't really get to explore it at all, and my grandmother got to explore it, but she also had to raise 11 kids, so she explored it on the side in her later years. But um, it's raw and it's real and it's lived, and I feel like that's why the work has the energy that it does in it because of what it meant to me to both make it and share it.
Um, 11 children, can you imagine?
No, I can't.
Uh, how to raise 11 children and set them forward as best you can, um, so that they don't tumble backwards. Given the relationship that Italians had to the United States when the Italian migration started, your people were, as so many people, the indigenous people, black people brought against their will, but the people who came looking for a better life, so mistreated, so racially mistreated and mistreated. Just how do you suppose that when you go through that, those rings of hate, of prejudice, you can come out on the other side in your next generation, or even in yourself as a first generation, second, third generation, fourth generation, and have love for this country?
Well, for me, I lived in Italy for a while, and I thought I would fall in love with Italy and want to live there. And to be honest, after a few months, I started to feel claustrophobic because, you know, the US is a very problematic place on so many levels that we both know about, that people we know about why it's so problematic. But the people here, especially when you find your tribe,
Yeah.
growing up in New York, I took it for granted that everyone in the US experienced all the cultures that are in New York, that you could go to get Ethiopian food and sit around with other Ethiopians eating food, that you could go to, Cuban food and Puerto Rican food, Korean food. You could go to Chinatown and have a meal with all Chinese people. Like I took for granted that that's what the US was. It wasn't until I was older that I realized that, oh, most Americans, 99% of Americans are not having the experience that I had growing up. So for me, the US is this very complex thing where there's so much that I love about it that you can't really find in other places of the world, and there's so much of it that I really dislike, So it's sort of this very complex relationship where I just tried to enact the kind of America that I believe in, that is this melting pot where we're taking stock and owning our dysfunctions, owning our hatreds, and working through those things. So we're shining a light not just on the things we do well, we're shining a light on our own personal issues so that we can deal with them and grow. So, like on a personal level, I think I've been able to kind of grapple with that, where it's not a flag waving thing. It's like it's real. It's beyond that. It's an ownership of the pluses and the minus and holding them together instead of trying to erase the minuses and let's just show the pluses. That's denial and repression. And I know that doesn't work.
Um, yeah, when I was growing up, I thought everybody was Catholic. It didn't occur to me that You could be something else. Though we were all, aren't we all Roman Catholics? Um, and still, with the as problematic as uh, this nation is, it does have a beauty that other nations do not. And I'm not talking about this era that we're in right now, just how, yes, little by little, very slowly trying to create that more perfect union, if such a thing can ever exist. And art has so much to do with that creation. There's such a responsibility. I don't know if you feel it as a photographer, as a painter, as someone who's creative, who you just can't stop yourself from creating. Um, what what is the role of art now in
I
this?
mean, for me, art has the same role throughout history, and it's to tell the truth, you know. It's to show the truth. It's to show the truth of the human experience. I feel like whether it's politics or sport, you know, sports can sometimes get at the truth of things, but art has a way of cutting to the core beyond words. You know, you can go into my exhibit. That's what I loved about the exhibit so much is that everything I felt, everything that I was trying to say, art, when it reaches a certain level, it goes beyond my own feelings. It goes beyond my own intentions, and it becomes this vehicle for for humans to get in touch with themselves, to see themselves and to see each other in light that they couldn't see before. And I feel like art is one of the few things on the planet that can do that. So I feel like that is ultimately my role, especially now.
If the the role of an artist, I yes, it is to tell the truth. And yet, so much of art is not available in all the different neighborhoods. Not every neighborhood, as we know, has a good space for artists to show their works or to show a sufficient amount of their work for the exhibit that they feel like, okay, I'm telling as much of the story as I can within the confines of this space. And so art has become, in the way that people travel, and you know this, in the way that we travel, oh, people will go see Michelangelo, David, no?
Right,
And they won't go to their local
right.
gallery.
Yep.
They won't see whatever the museum, what local exhibit is happening or new installment is happening. Why do you suppose art went from being like a newspaper, but in visual, not the hieroglyphics of the alphabet, but of how you paint, how you photograph, how you create something, you make something out of iron, to being something that, because this your story is a story of almost everybody
Yeah.
who comes here just starting, just trying to get through all the 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 harshness.
Yeah, the barriers. Yep.
Yeah.
The harshness.
And yet it's the story that only in certain places, and I'm not signaling out any city in particular or any neighborhood in particular, but then it's not, why isn't it everywhere?
That's a good question. You know, one of the reasons I made the body of work was because I felt like the Italian American journey had not been portrayed in fine art. And the reason when I tried to uncover the reason why I'd never been to a museum where I saw people like my grandmother and grandfather on the wall, it was all these class barriers, uh, race, you know, and interestingly enough, the artists that have been inspiring me the most are the Latino and African American artists who are changing the art canon to include portrayals of people of color in such an incredible way that the art is it's the most interesting art I think around right now. Um, and so we do live in um, this segregated world, right? And the gatekeepers control the art world and all the other worlds. And so for me, it's always been about how do I join that conversation? And Kerry James Marshall, the great black painter, one of the greatest artists alive, he had a great quote where he's like, you don't ask for permission to join the conversation. You join the conversation by making work that speaks at a level that they have to pay attention to you. And so I'm still walking that path, you know. So I had this show in downtown Northampton. I want that show in New York. I want it in Rio. I want it in I want it all over the world.
Hmm.
And you know, so we do our best as artists, right? Murals are a great way to do that because you can do a mural in Springfield and talk to the Boricuas in Springfield. You can do a mural in cities where uh, average people might not go to the museum, but if you put that mural in the right neighborhood, they will see that mural. So, you know, graffiti was a great example for me. I grew up, you know, as you probably know, as a hip hop rapper and record producer. And, you know, that global movement that's what, 50 years old now, started by teenagers in the ghetto, right? And with very little access to art supplies, to galleries. Like the galleries in downtown New York had no idea what was hitting them.
None.
And yet that came from the people, and it had a legs that galleries have never had. So there, I know that work on a certain level can transcend these limitations.
I saw this article. I didn't read it because I don't have a subscription to the newspaper where the article was published on the Met Gala, which is put on by Vogue, and it's supposed to be this annual and everybody event. It's the event on a wind tour. It's just like all the super mega wealthy people, and it focused on a black culture in design and fashion, and yet only those artists who showed up could afford to pay for those those clothes that they were wearing. And that's where I see that, okay, you created this, but it's not available to, and maybe it's not supposed to be. Maybe that's part of the gatekeeper
Yeah. Yeah, it's
rule.
designed that way. It's designed that way. Yeah.
Right. And to create like an elitist, and then
Yep.
if you're not in the elitist, then you have no access to it, which is of course extremely insulting and offensive because art is for everybody. And when I think of here in Holyoke, we had an exhibit a year or two ago by indigenous people, and it was it was awesome to
Mm-hmm.
see these works.
Yep.
And some of these people, their su sangre indígena
See.
has been diluted a lot over the generations by rape, by love, by the extremes, no?
Yep.
I think
Yep.
we've all been conquered and maybe we've all conquered.
Yeah.
I feel that I am the descendant of both. I
See.
don't feel it. I feel, it's just like,
Yeah.
what country can you look at and say, oh no, they've always been peaceful, loving people. They've never done anything to anybody.
Right.
No, or nothing has ever been done to them. It's just
Oh,
the
it's
human
like
race.
we carry that imprint on in our DNA, you know, that the myth, I think of one of the myths of race is this monolith, right?
Mhm.
Of this race is that and this is that. And but when we really look deep down inside ourselves, we find the infinite, right? We are the light, we are the dark, we are both together. And so, yeah, these are these big fundamental issues that humanity is grappling with right now. Like this is the truth. So to talk about them, to make work that centers these conversations is of the utmost importance because in many places in the world we don't have the capacity or the vocabulary to understand and discuss these things. So more than ever, and I feel like that's why we are at this moment in history. We are being called to step forward and have these conversations. They're not easy conversations, depending on who you're talking with. But even inside our own selves, like you said, It's liberating, though. That's the difference. Like to engage on this level, to search our own souls is liberating. It's empowering. Whereas the other direction of denial and repression only leads to more suffering.
Yeah, I think that I'm hopeful that, as you know, or you may know, that there have been cuts to the National Endowment for the Arts, multi-million dollar cuts that end up in neighborhoods, in the pockets of artists, so that they can buy the supplies, so that they can, you don't just go buy paint at a big box store and expect that paint to last 100 years.
Yeah.
The canvas has to be prepared, the paint has to be exceptional quality, so it lives on for generations to come. And I'm wondering, besides those cuts, when you create, because I love your work, I feel it so familiar to me. It is always familiar. It is never like, I need to understand what you're trying to say. Never. It is,
Right.
I'm in the conversation like that.
Right. Yeah.
And with my heart, with feeling. Um, what where does the lack of appreciation, where will that take us? Lack of appreciation of art. If we continue on this road where we eliminate venues and
I mean,
multimedia.
it's like that movie, The Lorax, right?
I didn't
The
see it.
Lorax, the Lorax is the Seuss book and movie about when the big conglomerates cut down all the trees
Mm,
on the planet
okay.
and no one checked them.
Yeah.
And so the world becomes, we know we know what hell on earth looks like.
Yeah.
We lived through World War II. We've seen pictures of Nagasaki and Hiroshima. We know what that looks like.
Yeah.
And so we know what we're facing. This isn't our first rodeo on this
No.
planet, right? So we recognize the rhetoric. We recognize it when political candidates use those words. We know what they're talking about. When we see these cuts, we feel them. I mean, I had a 14-year job with a nonprofit locally that was ended. I was let go because of the cuts of not getting a grant from the NEA was the reason I was given. And so I myself am looking to supplement my own income. So, I feel like this is part of the struggle on Earth about what's important and why are we here. And um, it's an ongoing struggle. It's not a cakewalk. But I feel like the best thing I can do is live authentically. Speak my truth in with you and with every other human being I speak with, speak my truth to myself, not hide in my own illusions, and live authentically and fully. And, you know, we create the world. I feel like a lot of people have gotten lost in pointing the finger. Yes, we need to know what the administration is doing. We need to know what is happening in the world, in our town, in our country. But we also we need to put forth a different vision. It's like if you got a better vision, publicize that
Mhm.
instead of always promoting the negativity that's coming out of the worst of humanity. I feel like now more than ever, like we need inspiration. And so those who have inspiration to give, share that.
When we see in a magazine, oh, look at these drawings that were made in caves, thousands of years ago, of, bison or people or whatever, or if the people having sex. It's like, was it you, como es it, utilitarian? It was storytelling. The way, and we seem to have lost track that we're telling stories here. Uh,
Yeah, but the stuff that I look to is all storytelling. The great work, and there's so many great artists right now all over the world.
yeah.
Uh, we can't help but tell our stories, right? Because what other story were we going to tell? Like even my project on Cuba, that was me sharing my own understanding of what family is and what love is and what unconditional love is.
Yeah.
That was me sharing my perspective. Like, look at this incredible people, an incredible island, incredible culture beyond politics. Like, who are these people? And this is who they are to me. And so, um, art, like you said, like for me, art has been a tool to speak, to communicate, to tell stories, and it still is. It always will be, because it's the only story I know how to tell is how I feel.
If you sell your work, how do you part with your work?
Well, that's the thing. It's like the work is almost a artifact of the creative process of making the work and of living and putting my life lessons into the work. So once the work is done, um, I've gotten to a place recently in the last few years where now I'm ready to let go of my work to the world, to let it be bought, to let people enjoy it, to let it go into museums. I mean, if I had my choice, they would all go into places that people can see them. And so you release the work so that it has a life of its own,
Mhm. Yeah.
so that each of these pieces, for me, it's almost like a child. It needs to go out of the house and live its own life and have the impact on the world that it is intended to have.
Like Khalil Gibran, that your children are not their children. They come through you, but not they're not of you.
Exactly.
The
Exactly.
art is just this is what I'm putting out there in the world. There's this mural here in Holyoke that I do not like at all. And I don't like it for a couple of reasons. And then there are tons of murals that I adore.
Right.
Of just they give me goosebumps every time I see them. Eh, and the one I don't like is because the artist, a Latino, on purpose started painting a wall with on the side of the Holyoke Health Center, where just about every Puerto Rican goes for healthcare, um, of a gorilla.
Right.
And so the first response was, what is he trying to say to us here?
Right.
And he said that he did that on purpose, and he had a disagreement with an agreement with the mayor to do this, to be provocative.
Uh-huh.
And there's a point where I get you. Sometimes art has to be provocative, but why do you want to discomfort the afflicted already?
Right.
Why target the people who are already suffering, who literally go into this building to get health care? And as you're completing a giant mural, you're showing something that feels as an offense. And then later, as he painted it out, oh yeah, okay. There's a, I don't even know. I try to block it. It's right here.
It's interesting. I think I know what that is. That the mural that's on the left when you're facing the center, and it's like green and
Yeah.
white.
Yes, green. Yeah.
Well, I don't know the story behind that artwork. I don't know what you're sharing. I've just seen it as a spectator, and um, I don't know all of the references that he's making in the work, but you can see that that's a very powerful artist with a powerful voice. And so, personally, the work that I make, I want it to stand for me. And I want to hit at truths that I feel like will last the test of time, universal truths. The way you connected to the work I made about Italian American culture, that's my highest goal, that it transcends culture and
Yeah.
it speaks to you and your family and your childhood and your life. And so these are the choices that each person has to make, that artist has free will, as we all do. And you and I are able to look at that work and have bones about it. We don't have to agree. We can critique and say, I don't like that for this reason. And that's an important part of it.
It is an important part, and I would hate for anybody to, throw balloons with paint to try to deface it. It's just
Yeah,
this is just my reaction. Other people,
yeah.
you know,
And there's a lot of beauty in that piece, even if the gorilla part, I don't know the story behind that, but even if you disagree with that, when I look up at that work, I'm blown away by the power of it. And there's so much beauty in that piece.
Holyoke, there's a website called exploreholyoke.com, prejudices.com, I think.
Mhm.
And you can see all the murals in Holyoke. Just
Wow.
looking at a map, you click, and then you can look at the mural. There's just some that they're mind blowing,
Yeah.
mind blowing. And I feel very lucky to live in a city that is responsive to
Yeah.
others who say, we have a project, we'd love to have, you have all this wall space. And of course, that takes good paint
It
and
does.
it takes money. And that
Yep.
takes the National Endowment for the Arts, and it takes a bunch of other organizations to fund it because it's
And
expensive.
that's where I think our society needs to change. Like it's one thing for the NEA to get targeted,
Mhm.
but like where is pharmaceutical money going, and where is Budweiser money going, and all of these communities, we buy all these products, but what is coming back into these communities? And I feel like looking to the government to somehow facilitate our greatest expansion. It would be great if we were aligned with our administrations, but we live in the most powerful economy in the world. And why are not these, Johnson and Johnson and all they own billion-dollar NFL companies. Look at the NFL. Like just one sport
Yeah.
creates billions and billions of dollars, and how can these major corporations who are making so much off of us and off of the world, how could they support beautifying our lives, our communities, the walls of our buildings?